It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Brian James Gage. Hey, Brian, welcome back.
Hey, Douglas, thanks for having me back. I'm happy to be back in the game.
Well, my pleasure. Nice to have you here. The last time you were on, did we talk about the movie The Kingsman?
Is that the one with the really excellent violent scene where they're fighting in the church?
Well, no, it's the one that's sort of relevant to your book series. It's the one where they go to Russia and they try to kill Rasputin. And
I haven't seen that movie. I saw the first one.
Okay, well, it's nothing like the first one. In fact, none of the people that are in the first one are in the third one. The only continuity is that they're showing the history of where the Kingsman Agency started. So they have to go all the way back to World War I. But historically, it fits in with your book series. That's why I'm bringing it up. And it's a really good movie.
Right. And also, it's a good segue into what we're talking about today, because if I'm not mistaken, that all of that spawned from a graphic novel, which I'm in the process of now. I just launched the first volume of the graphic novel serialization of my novel series.
Okay, well, the novel series is called Nosferatu. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, the Nosferatu Conspiracy.
Nosferatu, okay.
And then what I did is I really got into AI generated artwork because I'm not an artist myself, but I started recognizing it as an incredible storytelling tool because I was originally, I would like finish this because I'm working on the third for the trilogy for the Nosferatu Conspiracy novels. And so what I would do just as a creative exercise, once I would get done with a scene, I'd pop in a couple of elements from the scene and I put it in the AI to see if I can get some concept art back to essentially see if there are any ideas that I could expand upon, or maybe the AI came up with something interesting as far as, elements that I could put on the scene, etc. And then bit by bit, I started thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, if I just put thought bubbles on these things, I have a graphic novel here. So since April, I've been working on serializing the novel, and the first volume of the graphic novel just went live October 4th. Okay. And it's a blast doing it.
I guess it begs the question, why?
Well, I guess it begs the question, why not? I'm interested in seeing, I guess the real reason is that beyond the novelization, I'm sort of a novelist by default, because that's when I sit down to do, storytelling, that's my natural default mode of where I feel comfortable. Ideally, what I would be doing is filmmaking. But that said, I don't like dealing with a lot of people and obviously the expense of getting things greenlit, et cetera, especially on the scope of my works that you're talking. I mean, this would be, $100 million motion picture, which is out of the range of being produced. So the reason I like the graphic novel format is I'm able to visually demonstrate the storyline and, appeal to an entirely different mark of people who may not be interested in reading a 600-700 page novel. So that was the main reason. And I guess a lot of it has to do with me gravitating toward wanting to see these stories done in a more visual format. And this is what's available to me. So that's essentially why I did it.
Oh, well, that's a good answer. Well, I guess writing a graphic novel is more like writing a screenplay, where it's this sort of economy of words. You have to be very careful.
Sure.
What did you have trouble with that? I mean, did you have trouble condensing down what might be 40 pages in the novel down to a one-page blip in a graphic novel?
Well, that's interesting that you brought that up, because that was one of the first things that I thought that it wouldn't be possible to adapt it. But then I started thinking to myself, because really the way that it happened, I was working on concept art just for fun of the opening of the first novel. And then I realized, I described this opening lock with this, this craggy island that rises from the murk and all of this jazz. And, you got to describe that for a couple pages. And then in this thing, you just show it. Like, you don't need to describe any of that. So in many ways, there is some sort of like economy of efficiency that comes into the storytelling. And then it's a matter of, in the panelization, how much of the story do you really need to tell? So it's actually a very interesting exercise in realizing how much narrative bloat that there may be. So in many ways, taking a story that you've written, however you've written the medium, and then transposing it into a different medium, I think makes you a sharper storyteller. Specifically, like you said, with the screenplay, like, I've never thought of myself as somebody who could write a screenplay because I thought it was too naked of a format. And now that I've done this, I feel like, okay, well, maybe this is a skill set that I have after all, because I parsed a good deal of the novel in it's only the first three chapters, because I'm actually making it into a serialization. And once I got finished with it, I started looking at the way that I'm telling the story overall, to make it sharper, punchier. So now, because I'm thinking of it in two formats, well, I could release my novels, I could release my graphic novels, and then hopefully from this point forward, because it seems there's a lot of producers I'm living in Los Angeles again, and there's a lot of producers out here who seem to respond to a more graphic. If I put something in front of a producer that's a 700-page novel, well, good luck them ever getting back to me. Whereas if I could put a graphic novel in front of them and they could look through 10 pages and say, hey, this looks really interesting, it's a whole different way to engage people.
As far as the publishing of a graphic novel, like, I have no idea. I mean, is that done in the same manner as a novel, or is it a completely different group of people that are publishing graphic novels?
No, I do. I've decided, because I'm working on, actually, now that I've done two, I'm working on the third volume. I've done 2 volumes. And I'm working now on actually signing other artists and writers to come in and create, because I want to expand this entire Nosferatu Conspiracy universe, quote unquote. And I realize I only have so much time. So I'm trying to bring on other people to expand these. And I do everything exclusively through Amazon Kindle. And so even when, there's a quote publishing entity finally up and running, and I have multiple titles from multiple other people who aren't me, I still intend to do everything through the Amazon Kindle ecosystem, because I find that, one, the printing is going to be the highest quality and the cheapest. They also have distribution, although comic books is different because there's a whole other monopolistic distributorship that works in that environment. But at the same rate, if you're good at online marketing, you don't necessarily have to rely on brick and mortar any longer.
Well, okay, because I didn't know if it was like, does Random House do graphic novels?
I'm certain that they have an imprint that does. Forgive me for not knowing what that is, but I think they're starting to get a lot more respect, specifically the graphic novels over comic books, and I think it's one of the fastest growing segments within publishing itself is the graphic novel medium.
I wonder why, because if you go back into the 1940s and 50s and then 60s, I mean, comic books were for children. That's
exactly right.
What they were for. Yeah, no self-respecting, like, novel writer. I mean, they might read comic books, but you know what I mean? It was two completely separate things. Now they're coming together a little bit more. The line is a little more blurry. And especially with the big studios where most of the stuff that they're doing, the big, $200 million stuff is off from comic books. It's all DC and Marvel. So you're right. I mean, the graphic novels are gaining a lot more respect and viewership in the adult world. So
it's true.
I'm wondering why. Is it because our attention spans have gotten so small that we can only handle, like a 30-page?
I mean, that's probably a multi-tiered answer, in the sense of there are a couple of things. Specifically, I don't know if you remember Mouse. It was a graphic novel about the Holocaust that was featuring mice, essentially. Almost like a Watership Down sort of thing. And that went on to win a Nobel Prize for literature. So I think that was the first instance of a graphic novel being taken seriously beyond, hey, that's for kids, it's comic books, right? I think the other thing too, it's the same thing with video games, is a lot of people who grew up and love comics aged out, and now they're adults who want to see the same format with, adult themed stuff. So then enter, say, Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Frank Miller, Bernie Wrightston, a lot of these more adult-oriented artists who were pushing the boundaries as to what the actual comic book forum. I don't know if you've ever seen the Watchmen comic, but it's incredibly complex. And I would argue to anybody who says that something like that would be for children, I'm like, that is a high work of art. From narrative structure to the way of the execution in which they, produce the graphic novel itself. So I think it's fine. It seems like it's getting its due. And now that I'm working in this medium as well, I obviously have a great deal more of respect for what these gentlemen and people have done, trying to achieve it myself and realizing like just how advanced they were as narrative storytellers within a graphic medium. It's pretty impressive stuff.
Well, when you go back to looking at cartoons, for example, now there's plenty of, quote unquote, adult cartoons, The Simpsons, Family Guy. There's lots of them, right? The one that comes to mind is the Rocky and Bullwinkle series, because that was written on 2 tiers. And that was very genius the way they wrote it, because you could watch that as a kid and there was a kid level humor. But if you watch it as an adult, there's a whole nother level going on at the same time that would go right over the heads of the kids. And that sort of, to me, was the first one that was a crossover cartoon, if you will. Because, again, before that, it was just cartoons are for kids, like comic books. Right.
Well, I think even if you look at a lot of that started emerging even more so with like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which theoretically is a kid's film, but a lot of that stuff's, they always squeeze the racier jokes so that the adults are like, they're talking to me now, or whatever. I'm not really necessarily certain if I vibe on that sort of manufactured entertainment where it's like you're automatically thinking of a demographic when you do something, whereas I think it's more, of a pure artistic pursuit to just tell your story. And however that comes out, whether that be in a novel or a graphic novel or a poem or a film, I think if you're chasing like narrative authenticity, I believe that's going to shine through in the artistic integrity of the project, regardless of what medium you're working in.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that. However, the marketing and A&R people in the music industry would disagree with you because they have to have some sort of a hole to put you in. Otherwise, you're not marketable to them.
See, that's one of the things that I'm very happy to be working and actually, making a go of being an independent artist with my own imprint is I don't care. I don't have to listen to any of these people. If they're like, where will we put it on the shelves? It doesn't matter. It's my money. It's my risk. It's my story.
Well, that's the beauty of the DIY environment and self-publishing. That's the good side, is that it allows the artist complete freedom. However, with complete freedom, you're fighting up against, it's the David and Goliath story.
It's true. This is true. However, due to, look, I'll just be honest with you about some of my numbers, just to give you a representation. So, for example, so far, between the 2 books in the novelization series, I've sold roughly about 20,000 copies of The Sleepwalker and The Sommelier on my own.
Well, that's good. In today's market, that's really good. In fact, I've heard that if you sell 25, that's the number, so you're close, that they'll start knocking on your door, the publishers.
I get I get tagged interest here and there, and a lot of it's from like upstart publishers that's, like back in the day, the vanity presses. I think a lot of those presses that are trying to pretend that they're new imprints are basically just rebranding themselves as independent publishers to try to still squeeze out, eager people who think I tell anybody, do it on your own. Look, if Penguin Putnam shows up or DC Comics shows up and says, here's X amount of dollars and we're going to really get behind this, well, that's a different situation. Then you're working with their publicity teams, their marketing muscle, their brand names, and all the things that could really take anybody's career, including mine, to the next level. But I happen to be in the position where I understand. And by the way, of those 20,000 copies, I think I sold somewhere in the area of less than 100 in brick and mortar locations. And the reason why I was able to do that is I've built entire businesses based around essentially e-commerce marketing, web marketing, email lists, stuff like that. So I understand how to move product online. It just so happened this time around I was selling a product that I cared about, which was my own writing. So that's how I was able to manipulate a lot of these things. So in many ways, even though it still is an uphill battle, but I'll tell you what, it's an uphill battle for Penguin Putnam. Their average book, and I'm not saying Penguin Putnam specifically, I'm saying of a major publisher, the average book sales in, quote, their lifetime, which I think is generally about 3 years before they just shelve it, is about 3,000 copies. If you sell 3,000 copies to a major press, they're like, hey, okay, not the best, but we'll give you another go. If you're selling over 10K, that's good. That's considered bestseller level. And you're probably right with the 25K figure being, holy shit, this really moved.
Yeah. Well, it's so there's. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just to finish on that. I think there's a great democratization happening of these tools in the sense of like, I don't actually think I'm going up again. I don't look at DC and Marvel and all these other things or Penguin Putnam or whatever imprint as my competitors or people that I'm trying to chase, because they're they're all like Comcast, Universal or something. Like, I'm not going to go at $1 billion organization. What I'm going to do is just try to attract as many readers who love my stuff as possible and just build from there. And the truth is, I love what I'm doing. And I kind of don't give a shit about the results. I just want to put it out there because I like telling stories.
That's the best attitude to have. And similarly, I agree with you as far as doing this show. And that's why I do two different shows. One is for them and one is for me. More specifically, one pays the bills. The other one satisfies my creative necessity to be free as an artist. And I had people on this show who said, oh, you got to find a niche. And that was actually an inspiration for one of the chapters in my book. I wrote a little book called Don't Do a Podcast. And one of the chapters was, I got your niche right here. Because the whole point of doing my show is that I don't want a niche. I want to talk to everybody. If somebody has an interesting story, I don't care, who they vote for, who they sleep with, what color their armpit hair is. I want to talk to them. And that's the whole point of this show, was I'm going back to sort of my childhood with, shows like Dick Cavett and Johnny Carson, who had everybody on. Now it's like everybody's got their little fucking niche. And if you want, I want my, fix of the Donald Trump MAGA people today. Now there's 100 different channels I can go to where everybody's yeehaw, and similarly on the other side. So,
and that's a great tribal emerging through, digital online
media. And I think it's scary. I think it's really scary, and I think it's adding to the division in this country, because everybody has their little hole they go to.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, if you just want to sit there and just, drink from your own filth every day and just like, oh, my ideas are always the best. Well, you get tunnel vision and, and stagnicity intellectually, and we always see where that leads.
Yeah, wallowing in one's own vomit is really the way I like to put it.
How did you say it again? Wallowing
in one's own vomit.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of that going online these days.
So anyways, when I hear people say, I'm doing it because I love it and I don't give a shit, I really have a lot of respect for that. So thank you for saying that. Because
I'm fortunate because I'm also an entrepreneur, so I have other business ventures that if this was what I was relying on to make money, we might be having a different conversation. I'd like to think that I have integrity for my work beyond that, but when you're pinned and you want to put food on the table, who knows? But in the short term, I don't budge for anybody, and because I'm going to do it regardless. Because a lot of it, I got a little bit of guff here and there from people like, well, why don't you hire a real artist? Why are you using AI? I'm like, well, I don't actually see the differentiation in the sense of like, they're like, well, you know, a real artist could have been paid for this stuff. I'm like, no, they wouldn't have, because 6 months ago, I didn't know what AI was. If you would, like, for example, last year, if you would have said when I was on your podcast, you said, hey, Brian, when's your graphic novel coming out? I'd be like, Douglas, what are you talking about? I have no intention of ever doing a graphic novel. And then I found this tool where, because first of all, you know, some of these artists are good ones for $250 a page. So far, I've done 200 pages. So, you know, what is that? Somewhere near $30,000 to budget for this book as an independent person. Good luck flipping profit on that. Not that you couldn't, but that's a very steep angle to go after some returns. This just cost me my time, essentially. And the love of the art that is so high level, specifically because I composite it. I just don't use what the AI gave me. So I, you know, me as a storyteller had no means to be able to produce something like this. Number two, then I'd have to find the artist, pay them, collaborate them. Do they do what I want? You know what I'm saying? It could have gone on forever. So I think a lot of this anti-AI stuff is very, very short-sighted. I personally think it's excellent, and it's an excellent tool for storytelling, and it's going to, you know, change the world as we know it, as far as giving people opportunities to push forward their own narrative ideas, etc.
Well, so is it just a computer software that you have to buy, and then you're on your own?
Well, there's a couple of what are called AI generators. There's Midjourney, there's Dolly from OpenAI, and then there's also Adobe has one now called Firefly, and what's the one that I'm missing? Midjourney, which is the I don't know if did I say that one already? Anyway, so basically it's what's called prompting, and so you sort of learn to have this conversation with the AI to tell it what you want. Like, for example, well, I want a handsome man in his late 20s who's a Russian prince dressed in this sort of environment. Now, you may get that. And if you are, you're very lucky, because a lot of it is almost like slot machines. Like, there's certain prompting, and you could, like, once you get good at the prompting, there is a legitimate skill to it. In the sense of learning how to speak to the AI's language so that it gives you things that you can manipulate. Then what I do is, once I get something, what I've realized is if you give the AI one thing to do, it's very good at that. I want a handsome man in his late 20s. Boom, you're going to get that for sure. You start throwing other stuff in there, you don't know what you're going to get. So the way I was able to achieve a very rich and dense graphic story over, 200 some pages with multiple angles and the various actors in the scene and stuff like that is like I produced the character, then I produced their outfits, then I produced the background and posed them, and then I composite it all together using AI in Adobe Photoshop. So it's a multi-layered approach to storytelling. It's moderately complex, and I'm actually looking at this point in time wanting to expand into the AI comics. Essentially, I'm eager to teach other people how to do it and train them so I can unleash them and produce more properties. Essentially.
So what's the difference between this and CGI?
I'm not really entirely certain I have the technical expertise to answer that question.
Okay.
But what I do understand is CGI is for, computer generated graphics for film and media. And if I'm not mistaken, that's generally more of a 3D sort of situation where people will use like Blender or Cinema 4D or things of that nature. And they'll make these wire rimmed, rigged animations that they can, transpose over to film through rendering. And then, because this currently is just 2D, although some of these companies are already working on essentially CGI for AI. Like, you could go in, upload a video and say, in this video, put in a giant tentacle monster eating a fish taco. And then it will do that.
Okay.
It's pretty incredible stuff. I look at it as the democratization of storytelling.
Well, my understanding is of the difference, and I could be wrong on this, but CGI is the incorporation of real images with computer-generated images, where AI is 100% computer-generated images.
That could be, the technical quantification of all of that is, like I said, it's a little bit out of my pay grade. But my understanding would be sort of similar to yours in that CGI is what you put in a living scene. But you can now, look, if you could look at even like Attack of the Clones and some of that, so some of the stuff is fully CGI. It's all made by a computer.
Well, that's
not
true.
A living actor.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
and it's the same because there were a couple there, like the AI doesn't understand certain things like whistles or just like dumb weird objects. Like I was trying to make a tea kettle in one scene and it just doesn't understand what a tea kettle is. So I went out and bought a tea kettle and photographed it. And then I used a real image that I'd photographed and composited it into the scene. And then after I got done with all of that hassle, I realized no one's going to notice this teapot at all. So that was just sort of a waste of stupid time. But it was a lesson in the sense of like, for anybody listening to this is interested in AI art, and if they can't seem to achieve what they want to do for storytelling or other purposes, the reason why is you're giving the AI too much to do. And the less you give it to do, the stronger the image is going to be. So my technique is to essentially get what I can out of it and then composite the rest.
Oh, well, it's the learning curve. Just wait until this stuff gets to be thinking on its own.
Yeah, exactly. Then I'll just be like, hey, AI, could you just make the new comic book for me? That would be cool. Thank you.
Well, no, then the AI is going to be telling you to make the comic book.
Yeah, right. Hey, I'm the wrong guy to be talking to about this because I sort of welcome our robot overlords. I'm very interested in seeing what that might look like because I always have a tendency to enjoy chaos. But I realize
it won't be in our lifetime. You know, it's still sci-fi fantasy, but you can see the road to the reality.
You know, it's interesting though, if you would look at what these, even like the chat, the chat bot or the chat AIs and the graphic AIs and stuff like that, what they were capable of a year ago versus now is like,
it's
holy shit. Like,
yeah.
In 6 months. Cause I mean, I think OpenAI, the company that makes the DALL-E software and ChatGPT, if I'm not mistaken, they claim internally to have achieved AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. Because a lot of the way that these certain ones work is they're trained, they're like language models. So they're trained on a certain data set and they can't really do shit outside of that data set, right? Whereas artificial general intelligence can do anything that you want it to in any capacity that you need to interface with the AI. So if they're claiming artificial general intelligence, that's essentially sentient at this point in time. So we're talking HAL 9000 is real at this point.
Yeah. And I'm still waiting for the holodeck. I mean, I want one in my house when they have that, when we get there.
Well, because then you could throw on a VR set. I could throw on a VR set, and we could do this just, like a Johnny Carson style sit down, where it looks like I'm sitting right next to you.
Well, sure, that would be easy. I mean, I would like to do one where I can go in there with a guitar and I'm playing in, Shea Stadium or something like that.
That would be cool. Or what's that new that Las Vegas Dome? Did you see that U2 concert?
Oh, the Sphere or whatever it's called. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It does look cool. One of these days I'll get over there. It's like 10 miles from my house.
I was going to say, aren't you right down the street?
Yeah, about 10 miles away. So.
Right on.
Anyways, Brian, we got to wrap this up. Thanks so much for coming on. The graphic novel series is what's out? What's been released?
So the first volume, Nosferatu Conspiracy Graphic Serial Volume 1, which is called Lady of the Lock, just came out on October 4th. The second volume called The Stepan, which is, I'm saying it wrong, but it's Romanian for the master. That comes out December 4th. And then the third volume, I'm trying to put out a volume every other month.
Okay.
But it just depends on the complexity. But I very much appreciate you giving me a forum and helping me get the word out. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Last question. Give out your website where people can go look at all this stuff.
You can check out brianjamesgage.com. That's Brian with an I. Or you could check out the seedling of my publishing imprint for AI Comics at K13, that's K13press.com. And if you are somebody that has a story for a graphic novel and or are an AI artist interested in getting into comic books, hit me up on the website with a submission. I pay, and I'm looking forward to signing some artists to get the imprint running. So
okay, great. Well, thanks for coming on. It's always nice talking to you. Best of luck with this project.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.